Irish indie rock band Inhaler are back with their third album, Open Wide.
Their last album, Cuts and Bruises, was released in 2023, and for this album we've had 4 singles, with the most recent one dropping only a few days ago, which I always find quite interesting for an album release. But let's not waste any time and jump straight into it with the first track, Eddie in the Darkness. What did you think?
I thought that this was a pretty calm introduction to the album. Having listened to the whole thing, it kind of matched the vibes of the project as a whole. It built up nicely to the choruses. I quite like this song.
I like the nice swell that was in the intro. There's a cool bass line throughout, which is something that is very common throughout this album. Props to the bassist, because absolutely fantastic work that they've been doing. And I really liked the muted guitar strings prior to the chorus kicking in. It kind of just gave it an extra oomph when that chorus came through.
Yeah, and they injected a little bit more energy towards the end of the track, which I do think was necessary to kind of round it off into the next track, which is Billy, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This was the one that was released 2 days ago, which, like I said before, I always find quite interesting, because isn't the point of a single to promote the album?
I suppose it does, though. It gets everyone talking.
Yeah, I guess so. I really enjoyed the repeating guitar throughout this track. I thought it didn't overstay its welcome too much. I thought if the track went on a bit longer, I might have got a bit bored, but overall, I enjoyed it.
For me, this was a very stereotypical indie track, little head bop, quite funky. Obviously, not quite the same level as indie as kind of what's been popular in the last couple of months with Fontaines, Wonder Horse, etc. It was quite nice to feel some of those more old school vibes, but still have a fresh sound in there. But we'll move on to the next track, which is Your House.
Now, this is the biggest single by far that they dropped for this album. It's currently sitting at just over 4.2 million streams, and the track itself, I really, really enjoyed the little backing vocals they have throughout the chorus. There's those voices singing in the background. I think it adds to it very nicely. It layers it up.
This was a very 80s feeling track to me, by far the most that we've heard so far on the album. Again, though, I think that they executed those vibes really well and put their own spin on it quite nicely. It was interesting, and one thing I do want to say, I think the production on this album is fantastic. There's a lot of different elements coming in and out, but you can hear what's going on. It's not all just jumbled together, and this track was a good example of that.
Definitely, I completely agree with that. Something that I've written multiple times is the production's amazing. But one thing about this track, around the chorus, the instruments kind of feel like Just Haven't Met You Yet by Michael Bublé. Something about it, I don't know what it was, but it just made me feel like that. But let's not linger on Michael Bublé, because that's unrelated. We'll move on to A Question of You. Very funky vibe right out the gate. Proper funky throughout. Just a feel-good track, really.
And I've got a question for you, the viewer. Why haven't you hit like and subscribe?
Woo!
Hit those buttons. But for me, yeah, this track again kind of continues on those similar 80s vibes. I really liked the emphasis and more concentration on the few guitar licks, the few guitar notes throughout this song. However, I do think that this kind of blended in a little bit in terms of the overall album. It sounds, maybe this section of the album as a whole does that, kind of sounds very similar in nature, a few songs in a row.
Yeah, and even though it blends in, the next track is Even Though. Oh, that was terrible. That was so bad. This follows on from the vibes of the previous track really nicely. I think this is kind of the most coherent part of the album, where you can see a track listing forming and, you know, the way that the sound is moving across it. But there's not a whole lot for me to say about it. It's very chill. It does its job. It does feel somewhat like another album track, though.
Yeah, for me, this is the most album track on the album. There's some cool elements of it. It's a little bit spacey. There's some cool synths in there. It's not particularly a horrible track, but it doesn't feel overly inspired. It's not testing any new waters. So we'll move on to Again.
I really enjoyed how the drums sounded on this track. There was a certain mastering on them. I don't know how they'd done it, but I think they might have used room microphones for it, because it almost sounded like there was reverb on the drums. So maybe they had a mic set up outside of it. Whatever they did, really enjoyed it on this track.
I actually noticed the vocals in this song. I think there was a bit more concentration on those, and I enjoyed that. I do think the vocals throughout this album, again, are very solid. And having seen Inhaler, they usually match it live as well, which is quite good for a band. But again, it does feel, for me, this section of the album all just kind of blended into one similar soundscape. So we'll go on to the next track, which is the title track in Open Wide.
So this opens with something pretty different to what we've heard so far on the album. It's quite a different pace that it's set in. It's very ethereal kind of soundscape work that they're doing, which we've not heard thus far. And there's a really, really cool sounding bass throughout, which again, that's going to come up once more.
I think that this might be my favourite song on the album. It definitely is in this vibe, because later on they go in a bit of a different direction, but in terms of this more 80s feeling, building up the layers, lots going on vibes, I think that this is the best. It was it was calm in moments, but also exciting. There was so much going on in the background.
I definitely agree that it was 100% worth the title track name. Like, this was the perfect track to name the album after. But we'll move off it onto All I Got Is You, which, again, another sick bass line. Just give that man a raise. That man needs a raise.
And All He Does Have Is You, which he did repeat a little bit too much in this song for me. We must have heard that line about 50 times by the end of the track. Not that that in itself is always a problem, but I was kind of bored of that by the end of it. I thought the end section with the concentration on the deeper sounding bass was really cool and the best element of this song.
Yeah, it's a really super tight track in my opinion. The production on everything, the mixing is really nice, and the guitar in the last minute adds a lot to the rest of the track. I feel like it was missing that throughout, and then that last minute or so really kind of just ended it out really nicely. But we'll move off whilst we're still young onto Still Young. These aren't even segues.
You're kind of not committing to it enough.
Yeah.
You're going to do it. You need to do it. This, to me, put simply, was a cut and paste indie track without any unique elements.
Yeah, there's a tiny bit of a crunch behind the acoustic guitar, just a tiny little bit. I don't really know how to put my words forwards over it, but it does feel like a lot of the elements for this track are elements that we've already heard 3 or 4 times already.
This is the first of 2 songs I'll say this for. For some reason, this really sounds like more recent work by The Killers. It proper gives those kind of American indie vibes, but without much content, in my opinion. However, the next song, The Charms, the drumming on this is fantastic. The drumming on this, if you actually concentrate on it when you're listening, there's just so many different notes going in and out and different sounds and different patterns that it makes the song so good.
I think this is a masterclass on every instrument in the band. Even the vocals I've got here, I really, really like the vocals on this track. And everything is audible. Nothing is missed out. Nothing is like dampened out in the mix, which you can get with some albums nowadays. I feel like they've actually managed to make everything equal so you can hear everything coming through, and it works so well.
And again, we've said this a couple times now. I think maybe this is actually to the album's detriment a little bit, but the last 20 seconds of this song where the vocals drown out and you can really concentrate on the instrumental are maybe my favourite bit of this song. But that's happened a few too many times for me, where it's like the best part is the last minute, which is fine, but it's like I'm constantly waiting for it to be at its pinnacle. Maybe some songs need to come into that a little bit earlier. But up next, Tim, is X-Ray. What do you think of that?
I really like the grunginess of the guitar that's around the chorus. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I think it gets the job done in what it was trying to do, but for me, doesn't quite hit the mark.
There was moments of stripped back vocals where then the song jumps back in that I thought were cool. But for me, this wasn't a particular highlight of the album. But I would say again, the production's great. The vocals sound good. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my favourite song. However, Concrete,
baby.
Concrete's a strange name for a song, isn't it? I looked at it and I think I wrote down Concentrate at first because that makes more sense. But anyway, Concrete, this was one of my favourite songs on the entire album. High tempo compared to practically everything else. Unreal little indie riff. This is exactly what I'm here for.
There's these up-tempo drum beat and it contrasts against the slower guitar and vocals just really well. It kind of gives it a weird energy where you want to move forwards, but at the same time, if you just listen to the vocals and the guitar, you can chill out. If you bring the drums into it, it speeds you up and keeps things flowing. And it feels, at this point, things were feeling a little bit samey, but I feel like this has switched it up slightly and kind of giving it a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I would agree. For me, all I want is some good indie vocals and a nice little chorus with a cool guitar riff, and this achieved that, and we definitely did need a little bit more energy. We've kind of said, yeah, they've done well with those 80 vibes. I think they've done that sound pretty effectively, but this felt like a more typical British indie song.
Yeah, definitely. And I think us focusing on every instrument is important because it is about the little things, which is the next track. Come on, that was good. This is an interesting backmasking used in the intro that kind of opens it up to potentially be a completely different style of song. I was a little bit disappointed when after 20 seconds it just kicked into what we'd already heard 5 times.
I thought this was really weird. When they started, I thought, are they going to go heavy here? Like, is this going to sound a bit like Deftones or something?
Yeah.
That's what the introduction reminded me of. To be honest, though, I disagree with you. I still really liked this song, and I think it was a bit more energetic still. I was actually quite surprised that, to me at least, they ended the album on a more energetic 2 songs than the previous pretty much entire album, maybe other than Billy. That was quite an energetic one. I thought this was good. No problems with it at all. Closed the album out nicely.
I think it's a very cool outro. It's very different to the other tracks, and I think it contrasts everything really well. And overall, it puts a nice little bow on top. But speaking of the album as a whole, what were your thoughts? thoughts?
I don't know how to feel about this one in many ways because I really liked Inhaler's debut album. The second album, not so much. Whereas I think on this third album, they have done a lot better at mastering that calmer 80s vibes, layering a lot of different instruments and vocals and sounds within the songs to keep them interesting. However, on that note, I do think that there was maybe a few too many of those songs that sounded a little bit too similar. Like if you had one or two more energetic or even an acoustic song in there, I think it would have made the album flow in a better manner.
I think there was definitely lulls throughout the album where I thought something with a bit more energy injected in here would really just kind of set it on rocket fuel. But overall, the album is very, very well mastered, very well mixed. I really like the production throughout. The bass is a definite standout part for me. I think he's done an amazing job throughout this. And to be fair, Elijah's vocals on this album are particularly good. Like you can tell that he's worked on them over the years.
Yeah, my only thing for this album is I think it's good. I think pretty much every element about it's good. The more energetic songs are done well. The calmer ones are done well. The ethereal, spacey ones are done well. I think it was just for me missing that little flair, that little bit of excitement. And the last two songs captured that to a certain extent. But I felt like they just felt like they were going, no, we can still do that.
Yeah, just so you know, we've still got it in the tank. Well, how about you take those next time and scatter them throughout the album to keep people interested? Like, it did feel a little bit repetitive, but I do think that overall it was a good album and a good addition to their discography.
Well, on that note, Tim, what would you rate Open Wide by Inhaler out of 10?
My rating for this album is going to come slightly deficit at 6 out of 10. And the reason for that is because of the repetitiveness for me. It just kind of knocked it down a bit. There was a couple of tracks where I thought if you'd have taken them out, it wouldn't have affected the album listing at all. But what would you give it?
I'm not that much higher than you. I'm at a 7. I think there was lots of elements to enjoy about this album and a few songs that I will be listening to on repeat for a little while. So a 7 for me is a fair rating. Could have been improved, but still very good.
And just like there's a lot of elements to enjoy in this album, there's a lot of elements to enjoy on our YouTube channel. We do reviews of all the newest albums from big artists. We do a Was It That Good series where we review the best albums of artists to see if they actually were as good as people say they were.
So remember to hit like and subscribe. We appreciate everyone that hits those buttons. We'll catch you again soon.
Thank you very much.